Salam, Sanbunani, Mogweni, Namaste, Vanakkam, Hetepu, and welcome to this Sunday's edition of The People's Voice, produced and presented by your host, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed for Salaamedia, your humanitarian journalism portal and platform. We're broadcasting live from Tegwini, Durban, KZN, South Africa. Welcome to the show. Tonight, we're in conversation with a diverse range of guests from across the country, and we're talking about Azaan, heritage, and human rights. The questions we're asking: does the Constitution protect us enough? And what is our role in social cohesion? I want to help you tune into this critical conversation tonight, so you can comment, ask our guests questions, and share your ideas. Here's how we do it. If you're joining us, you are on the Salaamedia Facebook Live page. You can also watch via Salaamedia's YouTube channel and Twitter. You can listen live via the Salaamedia website, of course, and the Salaamedia or TuneIn app, and of course, all free-to-air decoders. What I'm going to do now is start a watch party from the Salaamedia page. So you go to the Salaamedia page, you look for the live video that would have just started now, and you share it to your profile or your groups, so that all of your networks are able to join the conversation as well. Gotta love the technology. And the watch party that I'm about to start now. There we go. It's as easy as that. The more people join the conversation, the more constructive it's actually going to be, working perfectly fine. All right, so what are we talking about today? Context. In August 2020, in fact, just 2 weeks ago, a KwaZulu-Natal High Court granted an interdict ordering a Muslim religious school in Isipingo, Durban, to ensure that its Azaan, call to prayer, is not audible to the applicant, who is a neighbor in the area. And I want to clarify that the Azaan itself was not banned. The applicant, the respondent, being the Madressa, was asked to make sure that the neighbor could not hear the call to prayer. It should be noted that the school states it does not broadcast the Azaan over an amplifier. So while the argument of the applicant and the judgment, therefore, are sadly Islamophobic, and there are a number of articles online, you can go and have a look, Pierre de Vos, Thomas Coggan, and the application and order are flawed in certain principles of property law, the impact of this judgment, which will be appealed, of course, is being felt across all religions, all cultures, all communities. Many people are painfully reminded of apartheid and the Group Areas Act because of this now restriction on religious practice, and the applicant's request that the school cease its operations and the school should actually be sold. Very serious, of course. These are extreme responses from the applicants after the matter was mediated by our South African Human Rights Commission in 2004. Here to unpack the legal aspects and the constitutional law aspects of the issue are going to be two of our guests, Aslam Mayet, who is an attorney for the Taleemuddeen Madressa in Isipingo, Durban, as well as Rehana Khan Parker, who is an activist, an attorney, and a former acting judge. Let's welcome them to the conversation. See, Rehana is just connecting there with us.
Hi,
all right, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Aslam and Rehana. Welcome to the People's Voice.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
To you, Shabnam.
It's an absolute pleasure.
And the panelists.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. We're talking about the legal and constitutional aspects of this matter. Of course, we've divided the show into 3 segments, very specifically and strategically. Let's start here, Aslam. You are the attorney for Madressa Taleemuddeen, which is based in Isipingo, Durban. Highlight for us the salient points in this now controversial Azaan interdict application and judgment.
Okay. I'll just give a little background. Taleemuddeen owns a large property on which it has a religious school and a mosque for its students. The Azaan is not read with a mic or loudspeaker. Next door is a mosque which serves the public, which reads the Azaan over the loudspeaker 5 times a day. Mr. Lowry is not an immediate neighbor, but about 20 meters away. Taleemuddeen owns another property about 200 meters away, which the municipality has approved for residential cluster housing. Mr. Ilori asked the court for two orders. One, that the Taleemuddeen cease all operations in Isipingo Beach and that the Madressa property be sold to the state or a non-Muslim NGO. Second order, that the sound from the Azaan of Taleemuddeen not be heard beyond the boundary of its property. Mr. Ilori brought the application against Taleemuddeen, which, as I said, does not use sound amplification, and not against the mosque, which does. Ilori said he could hear the Taleemuddeen Azaan from his home, but he made no allegation that it exceeded any sound level, that it created a nuisance, that it breached any municipal bylaws. The sole basis for the two requests was that he found Islam and Islam alone to be offensive from all the religions because it did not accept, in his view, the divinity of man, is sexist, discriminatory, disparages other religions. In addition, he was offended that the Azaan stated that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet of God. And he was offended that the Azaan resulted in more Muslims coming to live in Isipingo Beach. The judge did not grant the order that Taleemuddeen property be sold to non-Muslims or be driven out of Isipingo Beach on the grounds that a court cannot get involved in religious entanglement. The judge, however, granted an order that the Taleemuddeen Azaan must not be heard in the house of Ilori because he had an absolute right not to have his private space invaded. I think
all right, so
your question.
In summary, Aslam, and somebody's phone is buzzing in the background. I'm not sure whose it is. If you can please turn it to silent or from vibrate to silent. Basically, the matter hinges around one, the Azaan, two, he wants the respondents to leave the area, and three, he wants Islam to be declared a religion that is not congruent with the principles of the constitution. So it's not only about the Azaan. And certainly there were a number of Islamophobic comments that were made, and there are issues with how the judge actually addressed this matter. It was a golden opportunity for him, but he didn't. Let me ask you this, Aslam. You know, there are certain allegations that have surfaced on social media that some of the neighbors feel intimidated, etc. And I know that there was a supplementary affidavit that was filed by a neighbor who says, one, the Azaan does not disturb us, and two, we live in harmony with our Muslim neighbors. Tell us about that.
Okay, just to go back, the two Hindu neighbors filed affidavits in support of Taleemuddeen. They are actually, the one was an immediate neighbor, is even closer than Ilori, and the other one is diagonally probably about the same distance. And both of them filed affidavits saying that they did not hear the Azaan, and in any event caused no disturbance. In addition, the church, the Christian society, and the Hindu society also filed affidavits in support of Taleemuddeen, saying that there was not a single complaint in all the years that they've been in Isipingo from anybody against either the mosque or the Madressa, other than from Mr. Ilori.
Well, that's very interesting. I've got one more question for you before we turn the mic over to Rehana Khan Parker. And I want to encourage our listeners and our viewers to share your comments and questions with Aslam and Rehana, who are with us for the next 20 minutes. And my question is this: the eThekwini municipality did not oppose this application, Aslam. Why?
Yes. No relief was sought against the municipality, which was cited as an interested party. I speculate that it was of no concern to the municipality whether Taleemuddeen can or cannot read Azaan, or whether it's driven out of Isipingo. So there was no compelling reason for the municipality to devote money and resources. But perhaps that was an error, because now every single person can bring an application to stop car noise passing by your home and invading your private space, to give you an example, even if it does not reach any municipal bylaw. So now there's no standard. The municipality has, you can't exceed certain decibels, it cannot be for a longer period. And besides the municipal bylaws, there's case laws to that effect. If this court case is followed, there's no standard, there's no measure to judge it by. Anybody can say, I can hear it, I want it stopped. And in terms of this judgment, it's an absolute right. You don't balance it against the Constitution. You don't balance it in the society you're living in. Society, if you're living in a flat, everything would now come to a state. You'll be walking on eggshells. You don't. I mean, imagine living in a flat and not making any sound that your neighbor cannot hear. Probably the entire economy can come to a standstill. Buses, taxis, planes, trains, trucks passing your house. If you live on the highway, everything can be stopped because you've got an absolute right not to have your private space invaded.
Sounds like worse of a lockdown than COVID-19, Aslam. All right, let's turn the mic over to Rehana, activist, attorney, and former acting judge. Rehana, outline for us where the application and the judgment erred, in your opinion.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon to everyone tuning in on this lovely Sunday afternoon, talking about a topic that we in South Africa, the Rainbow Nation, should not be discussing. But this is what we are presented with. The most important point here is that the judge ignored neighbour and nuisance law. I mean, he failed to apply those principles and he failed to balance the interests. And yes, I do agree with you, Aslam, that the municipality should have been a party before the court, because I'm sure there should be a bylaw. In Cape Town, we have bylaws so far as nuisance and noise pollution. And you probably may have heard that as far back as 2019 in Cape Town, there were already complaints made about the Azaan being sounded in the inner Cape Town in the CBD. And yes, so this case sets a very poor precedent. It's one-sided. It clearly endorses Islamophobia. If one reads the judgment and see what the judge in fact quotes, I mean, he echoes what the applicant says, that it was a diverse, peaceful residential suburb and then becomes a Muslim enclave. And in fact, repeats what the applicant said, that the applicant is bent on changing it. Now, that kind of tone in a judgment does present with problems, and it appears that there might be subjectivity on the part of the judge, but that will be seen and tested as we go forward. He failed to, in fact, embrace diversity and inclusion of our various peoples, cultures, and traditions. He had a golden opportunity to turn this and make a far better example of the case, other than to show up the blatant bigotry. We are in a pluralistic society. We cannot deny that. We've got laws that in fact govern that. And he clearly failed to apply the facts to the law. If one reads the judgment carefully, one will see it is very poorly grounded in law. He had a wealth of case law, which he could have, in fact, grasped at, but it was not done. So, in short, he failed, in my view, to balance that very important interests of competing interests of a neighbor versus a community, versus the cultural significance of an Azaan or an instrument. Let's not call it the Azaan. Call it an instrument, a tradition, a cultural heritage symbol, which has formed part of our landscape for a very long time. And so he lost that opportunity. There are various other quotations from the judgment, where the judgment in fact speaks to the Islamophobia and in fact does not balance the interest of the respondent in relation to that of the applicant, but merely regurgitates the applicant's view as the only view. And in my view, I believe that the appeal will succeed based on the fact that there is a disconnect between the law and the facts of this case.
Well, I can see, and everyone can see, why Muslim women are not subjugated in our religion. I think Rehana is a prime example of a Muslim feminist who's telling it like it is. All right, Aslam, highlight for us the basis of the appeal papers which were recently filed. What is it based on?
Okay, look, the procedure is that before appealing, the same judge, Ngadi, has first to grant leave to appeal. The notice of leave to appeal was filed on Friday, and the grounds for the appeal are, inter alia, which is, I'll tell you some of them. The judge said that the Constitution permits freedom of religious belief, but not religious practice or the manifestation of religion. The judge is wrong, because the Constitutional Court has held that, and I paraphrase, the constitutional right to practice one's religion is fundamental and the hallmark of a free society. Furthermore, Section 34 of the Constitution states that persons from a religious community have the right to practice their religion. Secondly, the judge mistakenly held that Ilauri had an absolute right not to hear anything he found offensive within his home and building, disregarding well-established law of nuisance, which obliges all who live in society to bear some sound, provided it does not breach nuisance with regard to sound level and length of time. I had mentioned previously, but I'll just repeat, the media has often misunderstood the reach of this judgment, which is not based on noise, nuisance, and does not affect Azaan only. This "my home is my castle" may have been appropriate to lords, but not the serfs in feudal England. This judgment affects every religious sound, such as church bell, but every other sound. And as they imagine the countless number of people living in flats that may be prevented from making any sound or cooking smell, no matter how insignificant, purely because a neighbor hated your religion. Can you imagine the impact on informal settlements where many live cheek by jowl? South Africa is an open, democratic society. Our law is infused with the principle of Ubuntu. But as I said previously, it goes further. Life will never be the same if this judgment is followed. The person will
Sorry, Aslam, can I ask you to just pause there for a second? I'm hearing a vibration from somebody's phone. The phone needs to be on silent so we can hear you nice and clear.
Okay, I'm just not sure how to do it. My son has run away, so I don't want to touch something and it interferes with everything. Just to finish, a flat dweller will have to walk, as I said, walk on eggshells, and our entire economy can be brought to a standstill on the basis of this judgment. Now, Ilauri's objection to Taleemuddeen is not based on noise nuisance, but purely on his abhorrence to Islam and Muslims in general. So if a church bell rang loudly next to his, he'd have no objection. This violates our right to dignity and equality.
Beautifully outlined there by Aslam. Thank you very much for that, Aslam. Rehana, having listened to the highlights of the appeal papers and what it's going to be based on, is this appeal likely to succeed? And my follow-up question for you, what will it mean if the appeal succeeds for a potential JSC complaint, Judicial Services complaint, which, as Prof. Ziad Mutala wrote, the learned judge has potentially opened himself up to?
Absolutely. I must agree wholeheartedly with Professor Ziad Motala for his writing in the Daily Maverick on the issue of the Azaan, as well as the appeal and a possible likelihood of this case, in fact, landing up with the Judicial Services Commission. All cases on a daily basis in South Africa, judges and magistrates' cases are appealed. That's part of our legal process. In this case, Aslam had mentioned that the religious entanglement goes to such a point that it borders on, I would imagine it to be one of a subjective view, and that would stand to be tested by the judge, because he failed to balance those interests between the applicant and the respondent, and therefore the grounds of appeal is such, as outlined by Aslam now. He has already set the tone for some of the grounds of the appeal. I have mentioned it as well. That, I believe, would be a success in a higher court. Lowry, of course, stands outside all of this. It is quite clear that there is a clear intention on degrading the religion of Islam. I agree that this judgment has far-reaching consequences, even for the noon boom in Cape Town, which sounds at 12 noon every day, that a higher court will, in all likelihood, come to a different decision. Whether it is sufficient for a complaint to be upheld at the Judicial Services Commission is another issue. And that, I think, will come out once the appeal is going to be heard, and once one delves deeper into the case. I do believe that it is bordering seriously on a Judicial Services Conduct Committee investigation into whether, in fact, the judge was fit and proper, given our constitutional mandate that we come from, each and every one of us. We, as officers of the court, and a judge in his position, should ensure that the trial that he is presiding over is done in a fair manner. Clearly, if one reads the judgment, I cannot see the fairness. I only see a one-sidedness. And that brings me to competence. And that is such that the Judicial Services Commission, the Conduct Committee, will have to investigate. And in fact, I have seen the application, if I'm not mistaken, or was it the criminal charges of criminal injuria? But I would like to see that, in fact, the respondent in this case considers lodging a complaint. This is serious enough. I believe it warrants it.
All right, so certainly an interesting case to watch in many ways, a number of implications and questions, raised naturally about whether our judges have enough diversity training, for example. A comment from Esme Arensa: the church or faith communities have become like gated communities reserved for an exclusive few, and that is not what God wants for us. Thank you for that comment, Esme. Aslam, we've seen court. There's now an appeal. It's in the wings. It's going to happen. We've seen a picket. We've seen motorcades. We've seen 3 petitions. Equality Court is waiting, and criminal charges. Is Taleemuddeen open to mediating this matter with Mr. Lowry, given the fact that litigation can be, adversarial and divisive, etc.? Is Taleemuddeen open to that? I know there was a South African Human Rights Commission attempt to mediate in 2004. So are they open to a new mediation, or do they feel that this matter needs to run its full course?
Yeah, Taleemuddeen is not involved in any of the other formal or informal measures objecting to Lowry. My client is focused on the court case and is respectfully of the view that the judgment defies the Constitution, municipal regulations, case law, common law, and common sense. Ilori applied to the South African Human Rights Council for mediation, and he brought it against Taleemuddeen, which does not use sound amplification, and the masjid, which does use the loudspeaker 5 times a day. After a full hearing, the SARCH mediators, there were Professors Kati Govender and Suleiman Dango, recommended that the Fajr and Isha Azaan from the masjid not be amplified, and that Taleemuddeen must not use, it's got amplification which it doesn't use, and they said, please don't use it. Both the masjid and Taleemuddeen accepted, subject to them just getting formal support and approval by the community, which was a formality. But Ilori was very unhappy with the recommendations, and he simply walked away from the process that he had initiated. So that process fell away. Taleemuddeen has always been amenable and has invited Ilori to an engagement, which is repeated in the court papers. However, the appeal to have the judgment reversed cannot be stopped. Not for Taleemuddeen, not for every mosque or other Muslim facility in South Africa, not for every church, not for every Hindu temple or other religious facility, not for every informal housing dweller, not for every foreigner living under xenophobia in this country, not for every single citizen who supports the live and let live principle of our Constitution, and not for anyone who abhors religious or other unconstitutional intolerance.
Very succinctly and clearly described to us. So there was a mediation attempt initiated by Mr. Ilori. Unfortunately, the recommendations that were prescribed by 2 very competent commissioners were not enough for him, and that's quite unfortunate. It seems the matter does need to run its course. All right, we've got a comment from Rashida Khan, who says, so much to think about. Thank you for the insights, Rehana Khan Parker. And we've got one last question for Rehana. It's Heritage Month, Rehana, and it's certainly a very important time, and I know that a month that is also especially important for you there in Cape Town. Your thoughts this Heritage Month on whether our Constitution does enough to protect various relevant human rights 26 years into our democracy?
Oh, certainly. Our Constitution has set a sound basis for the protections. We have, without any doubt, religion, language, culture, traditions. They are all protected within our Constitution, and the values thereof are enshrined, firmly enshrined. However, it's for us, the Joe public, the citizen, Rehana Khan and Aslam Mayet, to in fact ensure that the Constitution becomes a working document and used. It becomes a vehicle to be used and to be tested. And we do have, of course, the National Heritage Resources Act. And the oral history is an aspect of a heritage resource which has not been championed, I would say. So the typical instruments that would come to court for protection would be your built environment, your buildings and your monuments. You have the odd paleontologic or the fossils or a aquifer that seeks protection, but on a large scale, it's the built environment. And dealing with the Azaan specifically, I would like the Commission for Religion, Language and Culture, as well as if one looks at the National Heritage Resources Act, which in fact defines oral history, one would be able to find a good fit for the Azaan, given the history of Islam in South Africa, given that we are part of this landscape, that it cannot just disappear. And that secondly, we need to ensure that we create instruments that in fact bring to the fore the many other oral traditions that come, not necessarily with religion. We always generally speak about the three mainstream religions, but there are many other indigenous belief systems. So I believe that whilst we are in Heritage Month, this case has thrown the spotlight squarely on whether we are in fact doing enough and whether we should go now and look at what is our oral traditions and histories and the cultural significance thereof, and how do we foster, how do we get greater recognition for it, how do we in fact embrace it, how do we take it forward. And UNESCO has, I quoted the act, the UNESCO has in fact created a platform for the protection of indigenous and folklore tenets of cultural significance. And I would like us to explore the avenue of the Azaan within that context, aside from Aslam's case in terms of the legal case. So heritage, yes, we've got the framework, but we have not explored it sufficiently.
Fascinating conversation with our two legal experts. We're talking about the legal aspects, the justice aspects, the constitution, and of course heritage. You're in Heritage Month, certainly opening up some very interesting conversations, all four of them, as we progress in this matter of Ilauri versus Madressa Taleemuddeen. Thank you very much to our two legal, constitutional, and heritage experts, Aslam, Mayet, and Rehana Khan Parker, for joining us on the voice of on the People's Voice and for being a voice of the people.
Thank you, Shabnam.
Thank you from me. So I would like to end off by saying, let's move away from the built environment and look at the living heritage. And let's explore that more fully. Wish Aslam all the best with his case. Shabnam, and to the platform, thank you so much for having me.
Before I let you go, I see a question. Says the biggest failure in the judgment is the judge stating in detail the applicant's hateful sentiments against Muslims, but fails to mention that the applicant is subject to the supreme tenets enshrined in the Constitution, and that of the right to equality and human dignity, irrespective of religion. Spot on, Rehana Khan and Anjumara Khan. Well said, Rehana, and many thanks for always championing our rights. And on that note, I will let our two guests, Aslam, Mayet, and Rehana Khan Parker, leave us for this edition of the People's Voice. Assalamu alaikum. Human rights and heritage law experts Aslam, Mayet, and Rehana Khan Parker. In the next part of our panel-based show today, we are talking to two faith-based leaders, and they are Pundita Lucy Sigaban and Reverend June Dolley-Major. Let's bring them into studio because, of course, there are aspects of faith that need to be discussed as part of this conversation. Prem Namaste, Lucy Sigaban, Pundita, welcome to the People's Voice.
Salam, Shabnam, and thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Wa alaikum salam. While we wait for Reverend June Dolley-Major to join us in the studio, let's give it some context. So the impact of this application and judgment are far-reaching. It could set a dangerous precedent for the silencing of church bells, temple kavadi prayers, Hare Krishna walks, joyous djembe drums, and all community gatherings. But it could also mean, as our previous guest indicated, that any person who is hypersensitive to sounds could apply to the court to ban children from playing, interdict braais from music, gag cheers during games of soccer, cricket, and rugby, muzzle family pets, and disallow even home renovations. It's a strange and it's a color-drained world. Now, reactions on social media, from supportive comments to initiatives to promote an understanding of Islam and the call to prayer, are building across the country. Many people are sharing their memories of growing up listening to the Azaan, or that it reminds them of spirituality. In fact, journalist, author, and Womandla editor Maya Jagjeevan Kalicharan wrote a beautiful poem on the Azaan as well. So the unity that has surged is beautiful to see, to hear, and to know. This is the diverse country that we know and we love. So while my technical producer tries to get hold of our second guest in this segment, let's talk to Pundita Lucy Sigaban. When you first heard about this application and judgment, Pundita, What thoughts crossed your mind?
Well, to me, both the complainant and the judge, they have no respect for religion. It also demonstrates to me that the judge is not well informed about communities in South Africa. The Azaan is part of South Africa. Everyone knows it. So for me, I mean, that coming from the judge, it was quite shocking. And, you know, the fact where he said that it should not be audible inside a neighbor's house across the street. Going to your point that you've mentioned earlier and also Aslam's point, I think my concern is what about other prayers? What about parties, people's private space, other sounds coming through? For me, it actually borders on hate speech, and I think he should actually be condemned. So I think for me, the judgment was totally not right.
Thank you for sharing this with us. What are your views on how this judgment could affect religious freedom in our country, not just now, but you know, in the long term, for decades even? Are you concerned? Are you worried about this?
This is very, very concerning. And I think for me, what's concerning is the fact that this may give rise to other applications and it may set a precedent which will negatively affect our communities. I come from an area in Asia, and we work very well with our communities. Everyone, Mr. Ibrahim Asfat, he heads the faith-based organization, and you find that during Ramzan, the non-Islamic people will patrol the mosques, and during Navaratri, the non-Hindu people will patrol the temples. So that you know they work beautifully on the cohesion of working together. And I think an application like this is going to just create havoc in the religious communities of our country.
I want to take a moment at this point to welcome Reverend June Dolley-Major to the People's Voice. Thank you for joining us, Reverend.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Let's catch up with the first two questions that I've asked Pundita Lucy Sigaban. When you first heard about this judgment, this application and the judgment, Reverend, what thoughts crossed your mind?
Well, when I first heard about it, I first thought it was fake news. I saw it on Facebook and I thought it was fake news in all honesty, because I thought, what judge is actually going to do such a ruling? And when I realized that it's not fake news, I was just beyond livid, because it affects us on every single level. It affects every, and I'm speaking on behalf of Christians. I'm not making the stance for the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. I'm speaking in my personal capacity, but it affects us on all religious grounds, irrespective of which faith we belong to. Because precedent was being set, basically saying now that if you have a problem with anyone of any religion, just go to court and you can just silence them. And if we're allowing the courts to silence us based on our religions and our practices, then we as a country are in serious problems. So when I realized it's not fake news, gosh, it honestly hit me quite hard, and it's something I'm very passionate about.
What are your views, Reverend, on how this judgment could affect religious freedom? Are you worried? Are you concerned? Long-term impact?
A long-term impact, yes, because it was quite clear that this man that went to court did not go based on bylaws or anything that was, infringed upon him, but it was basically his hatred for Islam. And so that is serious issues for anyone of any faith, because at the end of the day, it's the persecution of your religion. And if you can do it for one, then you can do it for all religions. And yes, that affects freedom of religion in our country, because at the end of the day, if I live in a community and I have a problem with my neighbor who's of another faith, then all I have to do is go to court and say, listen, try and stop this. And then he still makes a call to make it national and close the mosque down nationally. That's just unacceptable. So yes, as far as religious freedom is concerned, that is going to affect all of us. And so that has serious consequences, and it is persecution, and not persecution in the physical sense, like going out and beating someone up and we becoming martyrs, physically blood martyrs. But we are being persecuted for our religion by someone saying, listen, I want this practice stopped because I don't feel comfortable with it and I do not like that person of that faith. It is persecution of our religions. And so, yes, that judgment being issued, it was very clear from the start when that man said, and he applied for it, he made it quite clear that he did not like Muslims. Yet the judgment was still issued and the order was still given. And that is shocking, because then me as a Christian, or the Hindu or the Jew or anyone of any faith for that matter, we have serious problems in our country. We have serious problems as far as religion is concerned and the freedom and expression of religion. So yeah, it's quite serious, I think.
Incisive and powerful views by our two faith-based leaders. A comment from Dr. Nanda Subin: the Azaan was integrated into the texture and tapestry of the Isipingo beach that I grew in. What a beautiful comment from Dr. Nanda Subin. Pundita Sigaban, what does your faith, Hinduism, teach about interfaith respect, tolerance, and compassion?
Well, Hinduism teaches me about the concept of oneness. Okay, Swami Vivekananda put it very beautifully, where he said that you must encourage an Islamic person to be a better Islamic person, a Christian to be a better Christian. Nowhere in any of our scriptures do we talk about them and us. It's always oneness. And if I can quote the sixth mantra of the Isa Upanishad, it says, "The wise man who realizes all beings are not distinct from his own self, and his own self as being the self of all beings, does not, by virtue of the perception, hate anyone." The seventh one says, "What delusion, what sorrow can there be for that wise man who realizes the unity of all existence by perceiving all beings as his own self?" So I think for me, I'm shocked to know that this gentleman is Hindu, because if he knew his scriptures, or, let's not even go to scriptures, let's look at being a humanitarian. We live in a country where we've come a long way from apartheid, and we live where we look at each other and do things for each other. Everyone's looking at social cohesion, helping communities. And where does this man fall from? It's like, is it for real or something? So to me, from a religious perspective, I'm shocked to actually know that he's Hindu.
Some beautiful teachings there to share with us. Marisha Lala says, absolutely, Dr. Nanda Subin, the Isipingo I grew up in too. This shook me on so many counts, but the fact that it came from my area really upset me. And Jumara Khan, responding to Pandita Sigaban, says one word: beautiful. Reverend June Dolley-Major, what does your faith, Christianity, teach us about interfaith respect, tolerance, and compassion?
Oh, Christianity is a religion of love, a religion of peace. It's based on love, created in love. God is love, and we are there to love all people. And so, and I'm sure it's in every fibre of every faith, including the Hindu faith, as was just said now. But just a few examples from the Bible. Mark 9:38, Jesus' disciples rejected a healer who healed in his name, but was not one of their followers. And Jesus criticized his disciples, and he accepted this healer. And again, we see in Corinthians where Jesus teaches us and says, do not eat or drink anything that causes our brother or sister to stumble by what we're eating or drinking, again, embracing other faiths. In John 4, it says Jesus, again with the Samaritan woman of the outcast, and we talk about the Good Samaritan as well. He said it wasn't the priest that was right, but it's in fact the one from the outside that they consider. In the book of Micah as well, the prophet Micah prophesied already in the Old Testament about world religions at peace with each other. So Christianity is embracing of all. And it's quite shocking when someone from a faith, we know that faith, and especially Christianity, all other religions, in fact, is based on love and encompassing and tolerance and embracing each other. So when that man said that, and he claims to be a Hindu, I believe that's not the Hindu belief either, just as not us as Christians. So when I stood up, when I saw this, and I said, gosh, this is definitely not on, because all mainline religions, our inmost being is for peace, it's for love, it's for acceptance. And it's so more beautifully, we've seen it with our pandemic, with COVID-19. Now, all faiths have come together, united, and reached out hands. So our religion is about love, it's about acceptance. And so we reach out in love to the Muslim faith as well in what had happened to you, because it does not only affect you, it affects each and every one of us as well.
Absolutely. The whole world is one family. Marisha Lana reminding me of one of my favorite sayings, Vasudeva Kudumbakam. The world is one family. We work so hard for our freedom, right? What a beautiful expression. The world is one family. And of course, Reverend June Dolly wearing her kufiya there in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Pandita Sigaban, what would you say if you were to have a conversation with Mr. Ilauri on the way forward to resolving this case?
I think I would tell him the first thing I would say, I'm actually disgusted to know that you are my Hindu brother. And I'll strongly advise him to read our Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. And I'll also remind him that our scriptures strongly say that you need to treat your neighbor as you would treat your own. For example, if my neighbor's son has to get hurt, I must attend to him the same way I would attend to my son. And none of the Hindu teachings talks anywhere about division. And besides the word disgust, I have nothing else to say to Mr. Ilauri. This is not Hinduism, certainly not.
Reverend June, what would you say to Mr. Ilauri in a conversation with him?
I'll actually remind him that we live in a country that is so rich, culturally rich, religiously rich. It's a human race that we live in, and above all, we are all created by God, irrespective of our faiths. And so respect and tolerance, love and compassion is vital in our country. And in honesty, I'd actually tell him to go to that mosque, to knock on that door and actually speak to the imam. And he'll be actually pleasantly surprised that he would be welcomed with love and peace and open arms, because I believe that is what Islam teaches, religion of peace and love, as Christianity teaches that as well. So I would actually encourage him. We all live in communities. We do not live separated from each other. And in our country, we are so blessed with so much richness, diversity, and unity. So we need to realize, yes, we understand that he's got his own faith, his own religion, which we respect. But mutual respect is so important. So I would encourage him once again to go build bridges, not make war, and definitely do not apply for court orders. Just reach out. And we live in a community, in a neighborhood, different cultures, different races, different religions, different people of different status. But just like our body, we make up all these different people, but we are one world, as someone just said now, which you just repeated so beautifully. Spirit of Ubuntu, I am because you are. And so I encourage him to put his hatred aside, to actually get to know his people in his community, to get to know his neighbors, and then he'd be pleasantly surprised. He'll actually make lifelong friends. I can assure him of that. So I'd encourage him to go to that mosque, to reach out, to embrace diversity. Yes, individuality is there and we accept that, but to embrace diversity. So don't go to the courtroom, sir. Go and make peace and make a friend.
Amen to both of you. Anjumara Khan says, I'm a Muslim strongly steeped in Christian tenets of love, compassion, and forgiveness, imbibed during my childhood days at a Seventh-day Adventist school. How beautiful. Jatin Vallabh says, it is extremist behavior like what we have seen by Mr. Chandra that perpetuates the hatred that is ever prevalent in our world. It doesn't matter what you call your creator. Every religion teaches us to live in love. And Anjumara Khan says, beautifully expressed, Reverend June. So what would be your advice then, based on everything we've discussed thus far, Pandita Sigaban, what would your advice be to other similar applicants who want to go to court? Because this could happen. We have issues already in Johannesburg and Cape Town related to the Azaan, but the floodgates are now open where any religion could have to be, hauled before court and discriminated against, and all sorts of orders being sought. What would your advice be to similar applicants who want to go and litigate in court?
I think it's rather sad to see that people are taking this road. Firstly, if you have a problem with someone, you address it with them. That's your point of departure. But for me, I think religion is about embracing everyone. I don't really resonate much with the word tolerant. I think it's more respect. Because as religious, as people, if we are people of God and all of us love God, we should know that there is only one God. And if we are not informed about something, find out why are you doing that. Try and have a better understanding on what the person is doing instead of just opting out to go to court. Um, I believe that South Africa has come a long way where we're working well with each other on different levels, on different faiths. We have many faith-based organizations. There's a huge amount of respect. People are demonstrating for each other on several levels, and I'm concerned that things like this will actually destroy the hard work that has come through from people with good minds, good hearts. So I would strongly discourage people to do that. Start with, if you are unhappy with anything, perhaps have a one-to-one conversation with someone. Consult your scriptures. And remember, there is only one God. We call him different names. We choose different paths, and respect that.
And you've spoken so beautifully to that earlier on, talking about the patrols on special nights, etc. And Reverend June's talked about the solidarity during this COVID-19. We're going through such difficult times in our country, stuck between COVID and corruption, right? And the solidarity is what we need as human beings. Reverend June, what would your advice be to other similar applicants who want to go to court, who next could say, I don't like the church bells. I think they need to be quiet. Why does everybody need to hear these bells at all on a Sunday morning?
Well, I hope no one else is going to court, in all honesty. And I think if they do start going to court, we must take the court to court, because this is just utter nonsense, mutual respect, mutual understanding. And religion puts in a consciousness within us of care and compassion and caring for community, for all people. So why would you want to stop that? If we're going to stop and allow the courts to dictate how we worship, then I'm so sorry, when we're on the road to destruction as a country. In all honesty, we are going absolutely nowhere. We need to start speaking up and speaking out, and exactly that. We need to unite, and that's why I said we cannot just say it's just Islam, but just as you said, next is the bells and the smells that's going to affect someone. And if I'm going to have a problem with my neighbor, I'm going to take them to court. We need to stop it now before it goes any further. And I honestly pray that no one else get ideas of going to court, because we need to stop it before it even gets at that point. In all honesty, it's just unacceptable.
Well, the message is very clear. Talk to each other instead of litigating in court. It's divisive, it's adversarial, it's lengthy, it's expensive, and it's very, very stressful. Esme Aronsa says, beautiful, that women of faith are standing up for the right thing. And she's put an emoji of an olive leaf, I believe it is. Thank you very much, Esme Aronsa. Pundita Sigaban, how do you feel about the outpouring of interfaith social cohesion on that? I'm sure you've seen it. It's all over social media, but it's also in our everyday conversations. How does it make you feel?
Excellent. I would say well done to brothers and sisters across all faiths who takes a stand for something good. I think the Hindus, they went around Isipingo playing the Azaan. Well done to them. Another good example that I want to talk about is my good friend, my dearest brother, Fakir Hassan. He's Islamic, and he wrote about the Islamic woman who broke the murtis in Bahrain. Now, for me, that's a classical example. He is not a Hindu man, but he stood up for something that was right. And that's a classical example of individuals, of mankind, of humanity standing up for what is right. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, we one world and we are one family. We need to be there for each other. We cannot allow anyone to put another person down, especially from a religious perspective, because religion should be our foundation that keeps us all together. It's the one strand, the golden thread that holds everybody together. And if we cannot hold on to that, I must be honest, I don't know what's going to happen to this world. With all that's going on in the world right now, I think religious respect to each other, supporting each other, being there for each other on all levels is very important. That's the only way our world will move from one level to the other. It's not about my prayer and my God. It's about our prayer and our God.
Absolutely beautifully expressed. And certainly there seems to be a push against religion in our world, in different countries and around the world. It's certainly something to keep an eye on. It's very interesting and disturbing. Reverend June, how do you feel about this outpouring of interfaith solidarity and social cohesion related to this matter?
My heart was quite warmed when I saw different faiths coming together and standing together in support of our Muslim brothers and sisters. And the man, even though he claims to be Hindu, it's a reflection of himself and another reflection of the Hindu faith. And I just, as I said, my heart was warmed when I saw everyone standing together. However, I'd like to see more, because I believe that the Muslim faith has taken this matter further, where they are challenging now and appealing the outcome. And I don't believe that the Muslim faith should be doing this on their own, as far as the legal battle is concerned. I believe that people of all faiths, leaders of all faiths, need to now rally around together and need to more than ever now show a united front, go to court together in our different faiths and say, listen, we stand with the Muslims on this matter, because an injury to one is an injury to all. An injustice to one is an injustice to all. So we need to unite more than ever. And again, I say, our Muslim brothers and sisters should not be taking this to court alone, but the rest need to now stand together and say, not just on social media, where be social media activists out there and saying, listen, I'm speaking out against this. This is now a time for us to stand up together and actually put action to our words and say, I stand with you. So when we go to court as a united front, because it does affect all of us, irrespective of our religions. And once again, love is at the center of it all. It's at the center of all our faiths, and that is what needs to cement us together. And we need to show this gentleman that it is love, and we will conquer him over with love. And so I truly believe that to united we can make a difference, and we can overturn this judgment.
A call from Reverend June Major Dolly for interfaith organizations, perhaps individuals and groupings, to join the appeal and to walk the talk made here on the People's Voice. Thank you, Reverend June. And we've got about a minute to go. So I want to give you 30 seconds each for your closing comments. Pundita Lucy Sigaban.
Thank you very much, Shabnam. And if I may use this opportunity, I think you're doing a fabulous job. I want to thank you for the work you do for the community, for getting messages out there, to get the right conversations happening and getting right people on your platform. So thank you very much, and to your team as well. And I hope that justice prevails and God is one. Salam.
Namaste, Prem. Namaste. Last 30 seconds for closing comments to you, Reverend June Dolley-Major.
I just echo the same words and like to say thank you, Shabnam. Thank you so much for all that you are doing. Shukran. And may the Almighty bless you and your team. And I know that, in fact, you will have a victory with this. Thank you for always highlighting things that is relevant in our country, in our society. And thank you for being a voice to the voiceless as well. So thank you to each and all of you.
I am grateful for your love and support, and for having the caliber of female religious leaders. Yes, they do exist on our show this evening in the capacity of Pundita Lucy Sigaban and Reverend June Dolley-Major. Thank you for joining us on the People's Voice and for being a voice of the people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, a moving and inspiring conversation there with Pundita Lucy Sigaban and Reverend June Dolley-Major. Absolutely beautiful. Grateful to all our guests thus far who've joined us on the special broadcast on Azaan, heritage and human rights. Does the Constitution protect us enough? What is our role in social cohesion? These are the questions that we are asking. 30 minutes to go with our last two guests. Going to ask our technical producers to bring them into our virtual studio, and they are Dr. Rajendran Govender, who is a national social cohesion advocate, very active in the community, as well as a radio presenter on Ubuntu Radio, as well as Yazeed Kamaldien, who is an activist, a journalist, and a filmmaker who is based in Cape Town. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening on The People's Voice. You need to unmute your mic, Dr. Raj, and just see if you can turn your phone horizontally so it fills the screen.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly clear. Can you turn your phone horizontal for us?
Okay.
Yes, absolutely perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Raj Govender. I'm hearing a strange feedback coming from the background. I'm not sure if there's another device that's on. Sadiq, if you can on your side while we wait for Yazeed Kamaldien to join us. Do you hear that sound, Dr. Govender?
Hello.
Can you hear me, Dr. Govender? All right, it seems to have stopped now. Let's start the conversation by welcoming again both our guests, Dr. Raj Govender and Yazeed Kamaldien. I apologize for that noise that I can hear. I hope you can't hear it. But let's begin this conversation. Dr. Raj Govender, as a social cohesion activist, you're very active in the community on issues of social cohesion, on solidarity, on heritage, etc. What are your thoughts on the heritage of the Azaan, or the Muslim call to prayer?
Right. Yes, I've been following this whole episode with regard to the Azaan issue in Isipingo. And I must say that as a social cohesion advocate in South Africa, I'm extremely disappointed with what has been happening so far. I grew up firstly in Isipingo, right? I'm a whole Isipingo boy. And I know Isipingo Beach to be very, very much there's a large percentage of the population that's in Isipingo that are of Muslim origin. And obviously, anywhere where there is a large concentration of people of a specific religious grouping, there automatically follows the construction and development of religious sites, in this case, mosques. So it is normal and natural for a community like the Muslim community with such a large proportion of people there to have a religious place of worship. And obviously, according to the Muslim tradition, the religious place of worship would normally call people to prayer, and that's done through the Azaan. So for a judgment to be made in this democratic dispensation, whereby pausing the Azaan for the Muslim community in Isipingo is totally unacceptable. It's unconstitutional in a country like South Africa, which we always praised the constitution. Throughout the world, people say that South Africa has the best constitution in the world. I must say that this particular judgment have very much disappointed the people that have developed the constitution and all other policies and guidelines that are based on the constitution. So I must say, Shabnam, that this whole issue and the outcry from different people in South Africa, different religious and linguistic groups, is certainly going to assist in rescinding this decision. And I'm praying to God Almighty in whatever form that this decision will certainly be rescinded for the benefit of the community in Isipingo Beach. I couldn't hear you. Haven't heard.
There we go. Sincere and authentic comments there from Dr. Raj Govender, a national social cohesion advocate. Attorney Sadia Ghani wrote, "Diversity is the lifeblood of any society. We live in a world where integration and diversity should be the hallmarks of any society that wishes to grow and to thrive. This case presented an opportune moment for a judge in the setting of transformative constitutionalism to grasp the opportunity not only to foster religious tolerance and a spirit of multiculturalism and social cohesion, but to interpret the right to property with indigenous African philosophy that is waiting to be born, a philosophy grounded in Ubuntu. And I know you're very passionate about the philosophy and the practice of Ubuntu. What are your thoughts on what the attorney Sadia Ghani had expressed there?
Right. Basically, in 1994, when the constitution was developed for the benefit of all South Africans, right, there was very, very, great concern about the diversity of South Africa, which with so many different race groups, and each race group with their own linguistic and cultural and religious backgrounds. It was very, very difficult to ensure that there's going to be a smooth democratic dispensation. And that is why in 1997, the then Deputy President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, mooted in Parliament, or he proposed in Parliament, the establishment of CRL Commission. As you know, that South Africa, based on such a democratic dispensation, it has the Human Rights Commission, the Gender Commission, the Youth Commission, and so on. And the then Deputy President realized that South Africa is such a diverse cultural and religious and linguistic communities that it is paramount that all linguistic, religious, and cultures need to be protected. And that is why they established the CRL Commission, so that if anybody's cultural, religious, or linguistic rights are being violated or compromised, then they have this commission to go to. Now, I cannot imagine the judgment based on the fact of one individual in Isipingo that had been affected by the Azaan have caused the judge to make a decision like this. Yet we have the CRL Commission. Now, I am very, very keen on, trying to fathom what is going to happen going forward, where the CRL Commission have an important role to play in trying to assist in rescinding this particular judgment. So I'm hoping that people have already approached the Human Rights Commission. They've already approached the CRL Commission with complaints about this particular judgment. So I'm hoping that this whole judgment will be short-lived, because based on what you have just read out in terms of what the lady have said, the academic have said, that yes, we live in a diverse country and everybody have an important role to play. In the spirit of Ubuntu, in the spirit of social cohesion and nation building, we need to understand and appreciate each one's religion, culture, and languages. And the only way we can do that if we embrace each other. But in this case, right, the judgment has clearly demonstrated that they are putting a wedge between the different religious groups. And this could be a very, very dangerous precedent that is going to be set. For example, the Hare Krishna festival in the beachfront that's done annually. There's a lots of sound and music that generated from there. The Deepavali festival that is being celebrated annually at the beachfront. So if this judgment is allowed to go where it is going, then obviously all these other religious groups will be compromised. When people are celebrating, I often go to temples during Pertasi and Kavadi and so on. The mantras and all the practices and the religious discourses are done over loudspeakers. So if this judgment goes through, then the neighbors that are Christians, Muslims or something that feel that the sound is unwarranted, then they can easily go and get the temple to be silenced. So this doesn't augur well, not in a country like South Africa with such great, colorful diversity. So Shabnam, to the listeners, that you can be rest assured that with the momentum that this whole judgment and the manner in which people are addressing it, it will certainly not go very far.
Impassioned view there from Dr. Rajendran Govender, a national social cohesion advocate. And of course, South Africa is a constitutional democracy, as a result of which the right to equality, dignity, religious freedom, freedom of expression, freedom against discrimination are enshrined and protected. The court application and judgment has evoked, as you can see, feelings of shock, disbelief, and sadness amongst Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Most united in their solidarity to not only protect the Azaan or to stand Muslims against bigotry, but to ensure that the right to freedom of religion remains respected. Yazeed Kamaldien, journalist, filmmaker, and activist, welcome to the People's Voice.
Thank you. Shukran for having me on the show.
Wonderful to have you on. Can I ask you to just turn your phone horizontal so it fills the screen for us?
Now I'm upside down.
Okay, because it's not set on auto rotate. It's fine. You can keep it vertical. Absolutely fine. Not a problem. Yazeed, complaints against the Azaan are being heard in Cape Town and Johannesburg. Certainly not the first we've ever heard of. But it does make many Muslims feel unwelcome in a country that they strive to build from before apartheid and certainly during our 26 years of democracy. The irony is that icons like former President Nelson Mandela not only visited mosques where he was warmly welcomed, but was close friends with Muslims, including activist Mama Fatima Mir, Ahmed Katrada, and boxing legend Muhammad Ali. All right, so that's just some context in terms of what we're discussing in this last segment of our show this evening. Yazeed, take us through related issues in Cape Town that can be seen as Islamophobic.
So when one looks at complaints against the Azaan, it's actually not something that is isolated or new that we saw this year. There have been a number of complaints against the Azaan. There have in fact even been attacks on mosques in recent years. We had an incident where a pig's blood and a body part of a pig was in fact smeared across the entrance.
Can I ask you to just speak a little louder for us, Yazeed?
Okay. I just want to, okay, so just to start again, that the recent calls to silence the Azaan are not isolated. We have had these calls before. We have also seen some mosques vandalized in Cape Town before. Now, a mosque in Simonstown and also around there in Cold Bay, we had seen pig's blood and a pig's body part also being smeared on the entrance of mosques there. And the silencing of the Azaan, or the call to silence the Azaan, happened in Boerkaap recently, and it's not the first time it happened in Boerkaap. It also happened in District 6 last year. We've heard issues in another neighborhood called Strandfontein. We've also heard about issues of people opposing the building of masjids, of mosques in some parts of the Western Cape. And if I can just say that a lot of this activity is also happening in areas where it was formerly white-only areas, if you know what I mean. During apartheid,
yeah, that's correct. That's correct. That's a very important point that you've raised, Yazeed. What is the significance of this curtailment on religious freedom for the memories of those who still feel the pain of apartheid and the Group Areas Act?
Yeah. So when I go to Kalk Bay, which is a very beautiful suburb on the seafront of Cape Town, and also to Simonstown, where properties are worth millions because of the views and because they are on hills, I question, well, there are mosques standing there, and we know that historically there were people of color who were living there, and where these very expensive properties now stand, people of color used to live, and they were Muslim, and their mosque is a mosque that remains there as testimony to their presence there. You kind of like are bewildered by that, because people in those neighborhoods that were declared white only, and of course now we are in democracy, so you can live anywhere. People in those neighborhoods seem to be completely oblivious to the historical fact that Muslims actually used to live there, and Muslims were part of the history of that land and that space. And so firstly, they have erased people of color, and the Muslim people of color used to live there physically, and now they have even wanted to erase the Azaan, the mosque, the place of worship, you know. So it's kind of just an extension of ignorance and also bigotry in some places, because that is what this really is about. It's about bigotry, right? When you hate someone based on their religion or religious expression, you're essentially denying them, and you deny based purely on your own discrimination, right? So you don't really have a problem with, let's say, the any form of criminal activity. It's based purely on sort of like a characteristic or something that they possess, and that's bigotry that we still see in our country. It's blatant. I mean, yes, now people say it's Islamophobia, etc., but like it really just comes down to a complete unwillingness to accept the diversity that exists in South Africa.
All right. And of course, I just want you to touch very briefly, because I think it's important and it's related, on issues of gentrification in the Boer Cup, where Muslims in Cape Town are not feeling very welcome. Yazeed, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's very strange to have in Cape Town the first mosque in South Africa, where you have the first established Muslim community, where you have the call to prayer, the Azaan, that's been going officially for over 200 years, to now have people complaining about the Azaan in the neighborhood. And of course, this is the conversation that we've had before around how the demographics of the area has changed since democracy. We have had more, if I can use the word foreigners, and specifically these foreigners are Europeans, or they are people who are not accustomed to the neighborhood, its culture, and its community practices. And they are the ones who are going mainly to the officials, i.e. the city of Cape Town, to complain about the sound of the Azaan. Now, I have, of course, spoken in my own journalistic work with the city of Cape Town, and they say that, well, they need to go and investigate every complaint, and they essentially need to go and find out whether the Azaan, the what they call the decibels, whether it is at the right or prescribed level for a suburb, right? But the interesting thing is that this has never happened before. Only now, with onset of gentrification, that we're actually seeing more and more complaints against the Azaan, which has been so ingrained in that part of our city. And look at even the social media comments that people have made. There are other people who live near the city and in the city who are not Muslim, who are, if I can be specific, who are white, who are possibly heritage. They actually also have come out in defense of the Azaan. So what we're seeing really is a minority of people who are really not informing or educating themselves about the cultural and religious practices about workers, sorry, where they have moved into, and they are essentially creating animosity and really also just creating a sense that, you know, they should be pleased. Like people, it's almost like the community should change its cultural traditions to accommodate the people who have moved in.
That's a very powerful comment there from Yazeed Kamaldien. And of course, it'll be interesting to see whether this KZN judgment is now going to embolden other similar applications around the country, Cape Town, all over. I mean, in fact, it was a question that I was asked earlier on from a colleague, a journalist with a print medium, who said, do you think this will happen? And I think it's certainly something we can and have to keep an eye on. As seemingly small issues banning the Azaan lead to issues like a global refugee crisis. Because we are fearful of foreigners, we, other people, in the name of faith. And I think that's a very, very important and profound comment there from Esme Arensa. I asked Dr. Raj a question related to an article written by attorney Sadia Ghani, which was very well written, in fact. And Yazeed, Dr. Govender responded to that already. So I'm going to ask you about another part of her article that I thought was very interesting. She says, it was indeed a momentous opportunity to infuse neighbor law with the spirit of Ubuntu and give a post-apartheid, colonialist and indigenous interpretation to this very important area of property law. Now, she says that the judge has missed this opportunity completely, this momentous opportunity. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it would go without saying that because of our apartheid history, there could be people who still harbor a certain dislike or a certain prejudice against, you know, people based on race or religion or just whatever they feel, they don't like, I guess. But really, what this calls out for I guess, civil society and particularly organizations and faith-based organizations, is that really what we need to see in our societies more is interfaith work, because it's through interfaith work that people can begin to understand each other's religious expression and not fear each other's God or the gods that we choose to believe in or the way that we practice our worship of that God. So, if anything, what this symbolized, or rather, what this signified to me was that when I was looking at it, I was like, well, if somebody's got a problem with the Azaan, I would like to go and ask them, is it a disliking that you have, or is it just that you don't have knowledge of it? If you don't like the sound of it, then you have to accept that you live in a diverse country and that this sound is part of the landscape of that diverse country. You can listen to music, I guess, if you don't want to listen to the Adhan. But to try and silence the cultural expression of a whole community with a history in this country, that's kind of like, that's downright bigotry, actually. But I definitely think that the need for interfaith work now is so important because we are seeing more intolerance, particularly religious intolerance, where people are easily online, kind of like shooting off comments around, an us and them kind of scenario. So definitely there's a need for interfaith work. Ubuntu, it is about acknowledging the other person. It's acknowledging that you are part of a community. And I think that if we could understand each other's religious practices more, then we wouldn't actually have a need to get more worked up about a court case. And, it's unfortunate that it happened, that the ruling did silence an Adhan because of, maybe even a misunderstanding. I don't want to meddle in the work of a court and a legal system, but I also question what was the understanding, that informed that outcome. Like, how do you understand the Azaan as part of the landscape and the community, as opposed to it being an infringement just on one individual? But I don't
Interesting
want to...
perspective there from Yazeed, Kamaldien. And certainly when one looks at videos online of people responding to the Azaan, people who are not Muslim, listening and responding to the Azaan, it's a very beautiful experience. Dr. Raj Govender, you're very passionate about interfaith work, dialogue, education, solidarity, etc. What are your thoughts on what Yazeed has just expressed from your perspective as someone that's very much involved in interfaith work?
Can I? Thank you so much. Basically, I totally agree with him. Interfaith dialogue, intergenerational dialogue, intercultural dialogue is crucial in a country that is aspiring towards social cohesion and nation building. Remember, to have a socially cohesive society, that is the ultimate goal. But in order to get there, you need to bring people together more regularly around the table so that we can discuss some of the attributes that they pray to, some of their cultural practices, their rituals, etc., so that people can understand and appreciate their fellow human beings. At the end of the day, there is only one God there. We all pray to that God through different mediums. So Mr. Ilori, that have taken the mosque to court, is basically taken his own God to court. Because basically, we ultimately, the Muslims pray, and they only pray through going to mosque and sermons and everything. And basically, he does the same through Hinduism. So what I would like to suggest as a way forward, we need to fast track, because as a social cohesion advocate, one of the biggest tasks that we have is to bring people to come and sit and dialogue. In the past, we had great difficulty getting people together to come around the table. People were not interested. But I think issues like this, the Azaan issue and the manner in which the Scott judgment has brought about a community that is so divided, we need to now engage with more dialogue. Now, I know organizations like the Turquoise Harmony Institute, for example, they have what we call a monthly interfaith dialogue forum, where people from all faiths come together and they share some of their thoughts, some of the values, and so on. And I must say, it is extremely beneficial. And I've also been very, very supportive of organizations like there's an organization in Queensborough, for example, that during Ramadan period, they had open mosques where they opened the mosques to other cultural groups to come and see how they worship. Now, that is so enriching. And similarly, when people need to go and visit a temple, they don't need to be converted to Hinduism. Or when you go to a church, you don't need to be converted to Christianity. All you're going there to see how your fellow brother or sister that you work with go to school together, you sit in the same classroom, you basically want to know how they pray. And by doing that, you are able to understand and appreciate that person better. It reminds me of a situation when I worked in the Department of Arts and Culture. And remember, previously we lived in compartments, we lived in townships, we lived separately because of the Group Areas Act. And then when democracy was born, people now live together. And for example, a Zulu person lived next to a white person. And with the Zulu community, for example, ancestor worship or ancestor veneration is very, very important. And in order to communicate to the ancestors, they either slaughter a goat or a cow to communicate to the ancestors. The white neighbor, for example, phoned the SPCA to come because their neighbor is practicing cruelty to animals. However, that is their form of communicating with the ancestors. So if we understood why the person cut the goat, for example, then we'll be able to appreciate things better. And that is why your idea of interfaith dialogue is pivotal in understanding ourselves as human beings, so that we can embrace each other, so that we can love each other as fellow human beings. Because Ubuntu is nothing but I am me because of you. I cannot exist if you do not exist. My existence is because you are existing. And that is why I passionately believe that we need to have more dialogue, more forums like this, which you have arranged today, to bring people from different backgrounds, different cultures, to come and share in a very, very crucial and a very, very delicate issue like the Azaan. So I would say that we need to fast track this dialogue. And one of the key things as social cohesion advocates, we need to conceptualize and develop new programs and activities so that we can form or strive towards a socially cohesive society. And I am going to be advocating very, very strongly that there needs to be more of this particular dialogues.
Thank you, Dr. Raj Govender. Well, you certainly have my full support for an interfaith dialogue. And in fact, let's invite Mr. Chanda Ilauri to this dialogue and let's bring him to a way of solidarity and peace. A comment from Rehana Khan Parker, definitely a need for interfaith. Having said that, the majority of South Africans live harmoniously. And she also says Dr. Raj is a true social cohesion advocate. Yazeed, we just lost him a little bit there. I think there's a connectivity issue. Esme Arensa also says, the Turquoise Harmony Institute does beautiful work in the field of interfaith understanding. We all reach out to the same divine. So echoing what it is that you said just a little while ago there, Dr. Raj Govender. Yazeed Kamaldien, can I just echo the question that a print journalist asked me earlier on today? Do I believe that the judgment in KZN, in Durban, has the potential, do you believe it has the potential to embolden similar applications around the country, Johannesburg, Cape Town? Do you think that's what might happen?
I just want to check if you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear. Did you hear the question, Yazeed?
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes, I did. I definitely think that when bigots, racists, and people, do not value democracy and diversity as many of, I guess, the majority of South Africans do, when they do come across this court hearing, it would embolden them, and they would definitely be taking similar action, because we have seen people, and we know that people who do not want mosques in their neighborhood and Azaan in their neighborhood. So there is a precedent already that has been set. There are people who, like I've said earlier, have vandalized mosques. There are people who have complained to government officials, and not just in Port Harcourt, in other parts of Cape Town, as well as the country. So for those people who want to now take this and legalize and take it further, a court judgment, definitely would embolden them in their bigotry and in their, quite frankly, their Islamophobia.
Well, we're certainly going to keep an eye on those matters.
I just want to add that there is.
All right, Yazeed, we're battling to hear you there. Can you just repeat the last part of what you were saying?
I was just saying that the court judgment would definitely embolden racists and bigots and people who do not respect diversity as much, and to think that the response should be from civil society, greater awareness of the interfaith work. There should be more communication about our different religions and faiths, because I don't think that the fight is necessarily about trying to silence other people who want to silence the Azaan. It's about speaking about the beauty of interfaith, speaking about the beauty of our religions, and speaking about the beauty of our diversity in our democracy. That's really the way I would see going forward, whether it's a marketing campaign, a communications campaign, events, interfaith organizations, just making this something that is not about us and them, but making this about the collective, making this about Ubuntu. That's the feedback I would like to give.
And that's what being African is all about. Umuntu, gumuntu. I am because you are. We are because of each other. And of course, on the People's Voice tonight, we have a major calling for people to join the application in court and to walk the talk. People from different faith groups to walk the talk. And of course, to Raj, love to see that happen. We'll be there to support it in every possible way. I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Raj now for my final question for you, Dr. Raj, before we start rounding up this evening's show. What is our role in social cohesion? Because it's not just about the Constitution and whether the Constitution is enough, isn't it? It's about what is our role in social, so that never gets fought over. Do you think there's always going to be these issues in any robust, normal democracy?
One of the things that I'm very, very passionate about is to ensure that every learner, whether in the formative schooling career or even at university, they need to understand the population they're serving. For example, a doctor, if he is going to be treating a patient of a different religious or cultural group, he needs to understand that patient better. And the only way he can understand if he can learn about the person's religion, cultural background, or whatsoever. So my appeal to the powers be that we need to ensure that culture, religion, and language in South Africa need to be taught at the formative stage of a child's career as well as in university, so that we can understand each other better and move and strive towards our ultimate aim to be a socially cohesive society. So social cohesion is something that all of us need to engage in, whether we're Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, whatever. We all need to understand and appreciate each other. We need to open the doors of our institutions to allow other people to come and learn about our culture, religion, our language, and so on. We need to fast track dialogue. We need to engage, for example, the neighbor that's living across the road, belonging to another religious group. We need to invite them home for a cup of tea so that we can share our knowledge, our experiences, and so on, so that we can be better neighbors once again. If we do the same at school, we can do the same at the workplace, where people need to have lunchtime discussions at the workplace, where maybe choose a specific day like a Friday or Wednesday or whatever, and during lunchtime have an intercultural dialogue, so that people at the workplace can share their culture, the language, the religion, so that we can be better workers. Because at the work, we are all different. But if we learn to understand each other, we can improve the capacity of the work ethic at work or in school or anywhere. So my appeal is that we need to engage with government, we need to engage with the corporate sector and everyone, so that we can all work together and strive towards a socially cohesive society. And this judgment is certainly created a wedge in the community. And this type of wedging and this type of compartmentalizing people is certainly not there, because that silo mentality will make us suffocate. We need to break the silos and embrace each other. And the only way we can do that is we can learn to appreciate and understand each other better. So I'm praying that the God Almighty will not only help Mr. Ilori, but he needs to help people like the judge who made a foolish judgment. Right? He needs to make the judge understand that what he has done, he has created whatever the government and whatever people are doing towards working towards social cohesion, the judge has certainly destroyed all that hard work.
Powerful words there from Dr. Raj Govender. A consistent program. The government would step up to the table now that it's Heritage Month, and we hope that they're going to watch this very powerful show evening. But it is up to society and civil society and communities to develop these events and opportunities. And Zubaida Hussain says, let's pray together. There is only one creator. I mean, look at us here. Yazeed is in Cape Town. Dr. Raj Govender is in Durban. Salaamedia is based in Johannesburg. But we're having this conversation, and these are important dialogues that need to happen. I want to say a massive thank you to both our guests in the last session of today's episode. Dr. Govender, a national social cohesion advocate, and Yazeed Kamaldien, and an activist in Cape Town. Thank you for joining us and the people being a voice of the world.
Thank you very much. It was an absolute delight. And please, Salaamedia, keep up the good work. And Shabnam, you too, a very, very passionate person for social justice. Continue with the good work. And remember, we are always there to support you.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. Prem namaste to you, and Vasudeva Kudumbakam. I couldn't have said it any better than that whole word. It's Dr. Raj Govender. Today, so see lots of people doing the conversation now. We're almost done with the conversation. Sadiq, can you exit gracefully, Dr. Raj Govender, from the studio for us? Thank you very much. All right, so the message is very clear. The purpose of law is the pursuit of justice. Yes. It's also salam, peace. The message is also Ubuntu, oneness. The message is also Vasudeva Kudumbakam. The whole world is one family. We've had a brilliant show this evening, a special broadcast for People's Voice with our 6 brilliant panelists and some practical suggestions that have come forward.